If you were to compress like the entire 4 billion year history of life on Earth into a single calendar year, something really fascinating happens to your sense of scale.
Oh, it completely breaks your brain, honestly.
Cool. Right. I mean, imagine January 1st is the very first single-celled organism. And then throughout the spring, the summer, and, well into the autumn, life just remains incredibly simple.
Just tiny microscopic stuff for months and months of this calendar.
Exactly. Complex animals don't even show up until sometime in November. And dinosaurs, they have their whole era and are completely wiped out by an asteroid on Boxing Day, December 26th.
Which leaves us with basically no time at all.
Yeah, human history, every war ever fought, every pyramid ever built, literally every single word ever written down, all of that fits into the last few seconds before midnight on December 31st.
And that perspective shift is just so essential for what we're talking about today because we spend our whole lives operating in those final few seconds, right?
Yeah, we totally do.
We just assume that the massive complexity we see around us was, I don't know, somehow planned, or that it required this incredibly complex machinery to build.
But it didn't. And okay, let's unpack this. Because today's mission for this deep dive is to look at the actual engine behind that calendar year. Charles Darwin's theory of natural selection.
Often called the best idea anyone has ever had.
It really is. And the wildest part of our source material today is that unpacking this idea requires absolutely zero complex machinery. Like none at all.
No particle accelerators, no advanced mathematics, nothing like that.
Right. We are going to walk through the underlying logic of this process, and we're going to do it using observations so ordinary that, honestly, a farmer working a field thousands of years ago could have pointed them out to you.
That's the elegance of Darwin's concept, really. It basically builds itself.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, once you establish a few basic, indisputable facts of how life operates on this planet, the conclusion just follows with this unavoidable force of logic. It isn't a leap of faith at all.
It's just a structural inevitability.
Exactly. We just have to gather the raw materials first. And the very first observation, the baseline reality of biology, is that living things vary.
Meaning no two individuals are perfectly alike.
Right. No two individuals in any population are flawlessly identical. Yeah. And we aren't talking about massive, crazy mutations here either.
So no, like animals with two heads or sudden superpowers.
Sadly, no superpowers. We are talking about the completely mundane, fractional differences you see every single day.
Like pups in a litter.
Right. Perfect example. They share the same parents, but they are not carbon copies. One pup has a slightly thicker coat, another has a slightly denser bone structure.
Or one is just, a fraction more aggressive when it's competing for milk.
Exactly. Or think about walking past a field of wildflowers. From a distance, they might look completely uniform.
But up close, you start to see the differences.
Yeah, up close, some are a fraction of an inch taller, which gives them slightly better access to sunlight. Or some might open their petals just a day earlier than the rest.
Catching that first wave of pollinators?
You got it.
So that variation is essentially the raw texture of life. Without it, the engine doesn't have any fuel. But variation alone isn't enough, is it?
No, because if those slight differences just vanished the moment the organism died, the whole process would reset with every single generation. You'd never get anywhere.
Right, so the engine only turns because of the second farmer fact, which is inheritance. Those slight variations actually tend to get passed down.
And this is just a practical reality we observe constantly. Tall parents tend to produce tall offspring. Fast animals tend to produce fast offspring.
The resemblance isn't perfect, obviously, because that variation we just talked about is always in play, but the tendency is super reliable.
It is, and what I find so compelling about this, actually, is that Darwin built this entire framework without having the faintest clue how inheritance actually worked.
Wait, really? He didn't know about genes?
Not at all. He didn't know what a gene was. He had no concept of a DNA double helix. He was essentially looking at a locked box.
That's crazy to think about.
I know. He didn't know what the internal gears looked like, but he could clearly see the output, right? He could observe the mechanism at work, passing traits down familial lines, literally just by opening his eyes.
It really speaks to the power of observation. He didn't let the mystery of the micro prevent him from understanding the macro?
Exactly. So we have variation and we have inheritance.
Yeah.
But a system with just those two elements would simply be a diverse growing population. It wouldn't evolve.
It needs a push.
Right. The system requires a source of tension to actually drive change.
Yeah.
And that tension comes from a pretty harsh mathematical reality.
The third fact, overpopulation. Life produces far more offspring than the environment can ever support.
The scale of reproduction in nature is genuinely difficult to wrap your head around sometimes. I mean, a single fish can lay thousands of eggs in one afternoon.
Or a single oak tree drops thousands of acorns every season.
Right. And if every one of those eggs hatched, grew to adulthood, and had thousands of babies of their own, the oceans would literally be solid fish within a matter of decades.
The planet would be completely buried in life.
But the oceans are not solid fish.
Thankfully.
Right, thankfully.
Right.
Because the vast, overwhelming majority of those offspring just do not survive.
Because the environment has strict physical limits.
Exactly. There is a finite amount of food, a finite amount of space, and a constant threat of predators and disease.
So because of those limits, there is a massive shortage of survival. Now, the sources we read describe this as a constant, quiet culling.
Yeah, that's a common phrase in biology.
But I actually want to push back on that phrase, quiet culling, just a little bit.
Oh, how so?
Well, from our human vantage point, looking out at nature, it does seem quiet. Like you go for a walk in an old-growth forest, right?
Sure.
The sun is filtering through the leaves, a creek is babbling, it looks incredibly serene. But structurally, what you are actually looking at is a high-stakes life-or-death game of musical chairs.
Oh, that is a fantastic analogy. That is a much more accurate way to look at it.
Right. The music is playing, the acorns are sprouting, the animals are being born. But when the music stops, there are only, say, 10 chairs of sunlight in that forest canopy.
And only 10 chairs of food.
Exactly. And there are 10,000 players trying to sit down. The forest isn't peaceful at all. It's a localized bloodbath. It's just happening in extreme slow motion.
Wow. Yeah, that's incredibly grim, but entirely accurate. And that realization forces the critical question for the whole theory.
If there are 10,000 players and only 10 chairs, who gets a seat?
Exactly. This is where the filter of survival kicks in. And the defining characteristic of this filter is that it is absolutely not random.
It's not a lottery.
No, it is not a lottery where every seed or every pup have an equal statistical chance of surviving.
Because the game is rigged by those slight variations we started with.
Precisely. On average, the individuals whose specific variations happen to be a slightly better match for their current environment, they're the ones who secure a chair.
So the gazelle whose leg muscles attach at an angle that provides, like, a fraction more leverage, that's the one that outruns the cheetah.
Or the moth, whose wing pattern happens to blend in just a little better with the specific lichen on the local trees, that's the one that doesn't get eaten by the bird.
And because we already established that traits are inherited, when that slightly faster gazelle or that slightly better camouflaged moth reproduces, their offspring are likely to carry that helpful variation.
And there you have it. Over generations, that specific variation becomes more common in the population, while the unhelpful variations are filtered out.
That is natural selection.
That's it. There is no conscious design behind it. It is just the mathematical inevitability of what must happen when heritable variation collides with a shortage of survival.
But here's where it gets really interesting, though, because we are brushing up against the most misunderstood word in all of biology, the F word.
Oh boy, fitness.
Fitness. The linguistic baggage attached to that word causes endless confusion, doesn't it?
Endless. It really does.
In everyday speech, if we talk about someone's fitness, you picture a marathon runner or an Olympic weightlifter.
Right. You associate fitness with physical perfection, strength, health, glowing skin, whatever. We think of the strongest and the fastest.
But in evolutionary biology, the definition is fundamentally different, isn't it?
It is much, much narrower. In a Darwinian context, fitness means exactly one thing: reproductive success.
That's it.
That's it. To be fit simply means you leave behind more surviving offspring than your competitors. That is the only metric the engine recognizes.
So you could have an animal that is scrawny, unimpressive, maybe it sleeps 20 hours a day and runs away from every single fight.
Sounds like my cat, honestly.
Right. But if that behavior allows it to survive long enough to raise a dozen young, it is technically fitter than a magnificent, gleaming alpha specimen that gets injured in a territorial dispute and leaves behind 0 offspring.
Absolutely. That magnificent specimen is an evolutionary dead end. Its genes exit the pool forever.
While the scrawny animal's genes dominate the next generation.
Yes. And this is exactly why the phrase survival of the fittest is so deeply problematic, and why Darwin actually came to regret that the phrase caught on at all.
Because people hear it and think survival of the strongest.
Exactly, or the most aggressive. What it actually means is the reproduction of those who reproduce most.
But wait, if you say the reproduction of those who reproduce most, That's just a tautology, like it's circular reasoning.
It sounds like it, yeah.
And usually if an argument relies on a circular definition like that, the whole argument just falls apart.
That is a very common critique. But
Hmm.
in this specific case, the circularity isn't a logical flaw, you know. It is actually the description of the engine itself.
Oh, because the engine is a loop.
Right. The traits that help an organism survive to reproduce are passed on, which creates organisms better equipped to survive and reproduce. It is a continuous self-feeding mechanism.
That makes total sense. And because words like fitness and theory carry so much everyday baggage, our source material highlights several massive public misunderstandings about what evolution actually is.
And more importantly, how it operates.
Exactly. So let's dismantle a few of these fogs, starting with the classic linguistic slippage. The idea that evolution is just a theory.
Oh, this one drives biologists crazy.
Mm.
And it happens because we use the word theory to mean two completely different things depending on the context.
Like in everyday conversation, a theory is just a hunch.
Right, it implies a lack of evidence. You might say, I have a theory about who ate the last biscuit. You're guessing. You don't actually know.
But the scientific definition of the word operates on a completely different standard.
A completely different universe. A scientific theory is the absolute opposite of a hunch. It is a robust, extensively tested framework that explains a massive body of factual evidence.
Like the theory of gravity.
Exactly. We rely on the theory of gravity to land rovers on Mars. We rely on the germ theory of disease to develop antibiotics.
We don't call them theories because we are guessing about whether apples fall or whether bacteria exist.
Right. And evolution is a scientific theory in that exact same robust sense. The sheer volume of converging evidence is just overwhelming at this point.
The fossils, right.
Fossils are a big part, yes. We have the fossil record showing all these transitional forms, but we also have the mapping of DNA, which is huge.
Because that lets us trace common ancestry.
Yes, across entirely different species,
Mm-hmm.
with mathematical precision. We have shared anatomy, and we have real-time observations of rapid evolution happening right now in things like antibiotic-resistant bacteria.
Which totally clears up the evidence question. But it doesn't clear up the intent question, which brings us to another major misconception.
The good of the species myth.
Yes. People look at nature, they see an animal sacrifice itself for the herd, or they see these complex ecosystems balancing themselves out, and they assume evolution works for the good of the species.
It's this comforting idea that evolution is like a benevolent middle manager looking at the spreadsheet of the future and ensuring the long-term survival of the group.
But it's not a middle manager.
It is absolutely not. It is a comforting idea, but it fundamentally misrepresents how natural selection operates. The process has zero foresight. It possesses no group loyalty whatsoever.
It's just looking out for number one.
Pretty much. Evolution acts purely at the level of the individual, and even more specifically at the level of the gene.
But wait, how does that explain self-sacrifice then? Like, if a ground squirrel spots a hawk and gives a loud alarm call to warn the colony, it draws the hawk's attention to itself.
And it's probably going to die.
Right. So that looks exactly like sacrificing the individual for the good of the species.
It definitely looks that way until you look at the genetic mathematics.
Okay, lay the math on me.
Well, that ground squirrel isn't protecting a vague concept of the species. It is surrounded by its siblings, its parents, its offspring.
Oh, it's relatives.
Right. And those relatives share a massive percentage of its own genes. So if sacrificing one body saves 5 other bodies that carry the exact same genetic instructions.
Then the gene for giving the alarm call mathematically increases its presence in the next generation.
Exactly. The gene is selfishly ensuring its own survival, even if the vehicle carrying it, the squirrel, is destroyed.
Wow, so it really is strictly accounting.
Strictly accounting. If a trait provides a reproductive advantage to an individual or their direct genetic lineage right now, it will spread, even if that trait eventually leads to the extinction of the entire species down the line.
Because evolution cannot look ahead to see the cliff.
No, it only responds to the immediate pressure of the present moment.
Which leads directly into a very human misunderstanding, this deeply ingrained idea that evolution is a ladder of progress.
Oh, the latter metaphor.
Yeah, we tend to view the history of life as this upward climb toward complexity, with human intelligence as the ultimate goal or the pinnacle of the process.
And this raises an important question about our own ego, honestly, and how we contextualize our place in the natural world.
We naturally cast ourselves as the main characters of the universe.
We do. But evolution has no target. It isn't aiming at complexity, and it certainly isn't aiming at human intelligence. It only ever responds to what works best in a specific environment for a specific generation.
So it is a purely reactive filter. If the environment demands simplicity, life gets simpler.
Exactly. We see this all the time. Look at parasites or fish that have become isolated in pitch-black underground cave systems.
Oh, the blind cave fish.
Right. Those animals evolved from ancestors that had eyes, limbs, and complex sensory organs. But over time, they lost them entirely.
But why would losing an eye be an advantage? That seems like a downgrade.
Because eyes are incredibly expensive to maintain. Generating neural tissue, synthesizing the proteins for a lens, processing the visual data, it requires a massive amount of metabolic energy.
Lots of calories.
A massive amount of calories. So if you live in absolute darkness, an eye is completely useless.
I see where this is going.
The individual fish that happens to be born with a slightly deformed, smaller eye doesn't waste energy maintaining it.
So that individual has more energy available for foraging and reproduction.
Exactly. In that specific environment, the defect becomes a distinct advantage. Evolution rewarded simplicity.
That is wild.
Yeah.
We really are just one twig on an immense branching bush. We're at the top rung of a ladder at all.
Not even close.
And the source material actually makes a fantastic point about this. If evolution had a goal, if we measured the point of evolution by sheer numbers and survival success across diverse environments, the pinnacle of evolution wouldn't be humans.
Do you know what it would be?
It would be beetles.
By a massive margin. There are hundreds and thousands of species of beetles. They have adapted to almost every environment on Earth.
So by the pure metrics of natural selection, beetles are the great success story of the animal kingdom.
They really are. They won the game.
Okay, so let me summarize where we are. We have the raw materials, variation, inheritance, and a shortage of survival creating this filter.
Check.
And we understand that the filter is blind, reactive, and only cares about immediate reproductive success.
Yeah.
But there is still a missing variable here. I can easily grasp the everyday logic of a cave fish slowly losing its eyes to save energy, or, a fox getting a thicker coat over a few harsh winters.
Small adjustments.
Yeah, adjusting the dial is one thing, but a thicker coat doesn't explain how a land mammal becomes a whale. Transforming into an entirely new physical form seems to require something else.
It requires the one ingredient that human imagination is fundamentally ill-equipped to handle. Deep time.
Deep time.
We understand a day, a year, maybe a century, but the timescales required for these macro transformations are so vast they just become abstract to us.
Which is why returning to that calendar year analogy from the intro is so crucial.
Exactly. The idea that complex life doesn't even show up until November. We struggle to comprehend that the engine of natural selection has been running unbroken for nearly 4 billion years.
That's a lot of zeros.
It is. And when you introduce deep time, tiny, almost imperceptible edits begin to compound in incredible ways.
Let's track that with the whale example, actually, because obviously it didn't just sprout flippers overnight.
No, it is a staggering series of minor adjustments. You start with a population of land mammals living near the coast.
Okay, sort of like wolves or something.
Kind of, yeah. And perhaps the food source on land becomes scarce or predators become too numerous. But the shallow water offers safety and food.
So they start wading into the water.
Right. And the individuals with slight variations that make them marginally better at wading, maybe slightly denser bones that help them stay submerged, or nostrils positioned a fraction of a millimeter higher on their snout, they get the evolutionary seat at the table.
They survive and reproduce.
And then the environment continues to exert that pressure. The ones who can swim just a little further out or hold their breath just a little longer have access to untapped food sources.
Generation after generation.
For millions of years, the filter just keeps selecting for those aquatic traits. The nostrils slowly migrate to the top of the head to become a blowhole.
The front limbs flatten into flippers.
And the hind limbs slowly disappear entirely because they create unnecessary drag in the water. Every single one of these changes was a tiny, immediate advantage in its specific generation.
But multiply those tiny advantages by tens of millions of years, and the land mammal becomes a whale.
Exactly. Small changes, multiplied by enormous time, create entirely new realities. If you connect this to the broader picture, it fundamentally alters how you perceive the natural world.
The complexity isn't a miracle of sudden design.
No, it is the compound interest of survival.
Man, that is beautifully put. So what does this all mean for you, the listener, sitting here today?
It changes everything.
It really does. When we zoom out and look at the sheer scale of this idea, the entire glorious catalog of life on Earth, including you listening to this right now, originates from facts so simple a farmer could have explained them.
Variation, inheritance, and overpopulation.
You mix those raw materials with the shortage of survival, and you multiply it by billions of years of deep time. There is no hidden hand, no grand foresight, no predefined goal.
It is just a blind, reactive filter running continuously.
And internalizing that completely transforms how you view every living thing around you.
It really should. I mean, the next time you look at a houseplant on your windowsill, or a bird on a wire, or your dog sleeping on the rug, recognize what you're actually looking at.
What are we looking at?
You're looking at the current reigning champion of a multi-billion-year, unbroken chain of survival.
Wow.
Every single one of their ancestors, stretching back into that deep, incomprehensible time, successfully navigated that brutal game of musical chairs. They won their seat.
It is a stunning perspective. It really is. But, it leaves me with one final, slightly unsettling thought for you to mull over.
Oh.
Yeah. We've just spent this entire deep dive establishing that evolution has absolutely no foresight. It cannot anticipate the future. It only ever responds to what is happening right now. And it relies on vast, unimaginable amounts of time to make its tiny reactive edits.
That's the mechanism, yeah.
So what happens to life on Earth when an environment changes drastically, practically overnight? If the rules of survival shift faster than the generations have time to adapt, can the slow, blind filter of natural selection possibly keep up?
That is the ultimate stress test for the engine.
It is, and we will leave you to think about that one.